the tapestry of endless fields. Unified story format. Settle in now. Let your breath become soft, steady, slow. The world outside can wait. This moment is just for you. Let the edges of your thoughts grow quiet and feel the stillness begin to settle like twilight across an endless field. The air around you cools, not cold but calm. A hush wrapping itself over your shoulders like a shawl made of silence and stars. Can you hear it? Somewhere, far away, a hearth is crackling softly in a hall untouched by time. It's here. Our story begins not written in books, but stitched in thread. This is no ordinary place. The hall is vast, but gentle. Its walls of old stone curve inward, like arms holding a memory. There is no noise here, only the quiet pop of the fire and the whisper of wool brushing against wood. The scent of oak ash and spun thread lingers in the air, familiar, earthy, timeless. In the center of the room stands a tall loom, carved from chestnut wood, smoothed by decades of hands. Spools of thread rest at its base-age green, barley gold, sky blue, and moonlight silver. Before it sits a seamstress, her shoulders straight, her breath calm. She does not speak. She hums, a song older than memory. Her name is Elira, the last weaver of the harvest thread. Her fingers move with quiet reverence, pulling thread through cloth with a rhythm that echoes generations. She is not just sewing patterns, she is telling the land's story. Tonight, her needle traces the shapes of sheep, tiny, golden, no bigger than a fingertip. Their wool curves delicately, as if they might leap from the fabric and wander off into the hills. The fire flickers behind her, casting shadows across the tapestry, and Elira whispers to herself, in a time before the sickness, before the rains turned cruel, they planted by the moon. With every pull of the needle, a memory unfolds, not just in thread but in the very air. You are there now, in a village called Thistledale, cradled between green hills and silver streams. The people rose with the sun and slept by the gentle glow of candles. When the moon was full, they walked in silence to the fields, not out of fear, but out of reverence. They called it moon planting. It was sacred. Barley was sown beneath silver light, hands buried in soil, hearts lifted in quiet hope. They believed the moon whispered to the seeds. That moonlight made the barley stronger, sweeter, softer on the tongue. On those nights, no one spoke. Even the children tiptoed. The only sound was the brushing of feet in the grass and the soft pat of palms pressing seeds into the soil. Lanterns lit their way small, clay bowls cradling flame, carried by a girl with a long braid and wide, wondering eyes. Elira, she was the lantern bearer. She moved like starlight between the furrows, guiding farmers with quiet fire. And the moon watched not, demanding, not distant but present. Full, kind. They say the moon could feel the barley breathe, and pulled the tides just enough so the roots would sink deeper into the earth. No one proved it. No one needed to. Back in the stone hall, Elira's fingers slowed just for a moment. She sips honeyed milk from a simple clay mug and hums a tune you almost remember. Golden sheep appear across her tapestry, their meadow blooming between threads of barley gold and silver blue. And you are drifting softly through it all, between her stitches, between her memories, between time and sleep. This place welcomes you. You are part of the weaving now. Each thread holds a blessing, for warmth, for peace, for growth. Elira sews not just the past, but what must never be forgotten. That land listens. That silence can be sacred. That moonlight is a kind of love. The tapestry grows, stretching like horizon beneath a slow sunrise. And as you watch, you begin to forget where her memory ends and where your dream begins. You feel yourself dissolve into the field, into the wool, into the stars. The fire sighs. The shadows dance gently on the walls. Elira hums, and you float. There's no need to return. No urgency. No wait, only this gentle unfolding, this soft unraveling. As your breath joins the hush of the hall, you are safe. You are still. You are home. Drift, drift. No need to move. You're doing just fine. Let the air grow warmer around you, like a slow exhale from the hearth. Let the quiet deepen, settling gently over your chest, your arms, your fingertips. There is nothing you need to do but listen and drift. The tapestry continues to grow, and with each gentle pull of the needle, a new memory weaves its way into the cloth knot. Hurried, not forced, but flowing like rain over spring furrows. Tonight, Alira weaves a path of winding thread through the barley fields, a path so narrow it can barely be seen. It curves like a whispered thought between soft golden rows, where wild poppies lean and nod in the breeze. Down this path, a boy once walked, barefooted and quiet, his arms full of freshly gathered yarrow. His name was Tellin, and he was the son of the village herbalist. He knew every leaf by scent, and every root by touch, and as the moonlight bathed the earth, he scattered sprigs of lavender and sweet yarrow between the barley rows. A gentle offering, a sleepy spell, a blessing for the seeds to slumber soundly before waking in spring. Let the rhythm of that moment settle in your chest, the hush of bare feet on damp soil, the scent of lavender in the night air, the faint clink of a clay bowl held carefully in small hands. These were not grand things, but they were sacred. And Alira, years later, still remembers Tellin's quiet voice when he said, "Some plants grow better when you sing to them, even if it's just in your heart." She threads his path, now a narrow strand of soft brown flax that winds between the golden rows. So gentle, you could miss it, but it's there, nestled in the field. And as she pulls the thread through, the entire tapestry seems to breathe. Outside the hall, the wind rustles the tall grasses. There sound 1,000 tiny whispers like lullabies from the earth itself. It's night in this world, but not lonely, never lonely. In the distance, a nightbird calls softly, not a cry, but a greeting, a sound to remind you you're not alone, not in story, and not in sleep. Inside, the fire crackles low, and Alira's candle has burned halfway down. Still, she weaves. Her fingers do not ache. They remember this motion, this rhythm, as if it's a song they were born knowing. Each knot, each twist, lays down another breath of memory, and soon, a full barley field begins to take shape. But this one is from a different season, from a different year. Our story now turns to the harvest year, without bees, a year whispered in Thistledale's history, when the barley grew thick and golden, but not a single bee buzzed through the fields. No honey was gathered, no flowers bore fruit, and the people grew uneasy, for without bees, they said, the land would sleep too long. Some feared a curse, others blamed the distant war. But Alira's grandmother, a weaver before her, spoke softly to the hall one night. She said, "The moon cannot speak for the bees. They have their own tongue, their own silence, and they must be invited back." So the village children, Alira among them, begun to leave honeyed crumbs on flat stones, and carved tiny bells from walnut shells, hanging them in the trees to sing with the wind. And in time, the bees return, one by one, quietly, gently, as if the earth had whispered thank you, and the bees had heard. Let your breath mimic that memory, slow, quiet, like wings in a sunbeam, and feel that sense of rightness settle through you, like warmth through your bones. Alira now weaves the faint shimmer of bee wings into her tapestry, a glinting silver thread, barely visible unless the light catches just so. They drift above the barley, small glimmers of motion, silent in their flight. To the unknowing eye, they may seem like nothing. But to those who listen closely, to those who rest long enough to truly see, They are the story. They are the harmony. They are the blessing returned. Now, with a flick of her needle, Illyra leans back. In the fields she's woven breathe with life. The sheep doze beneath flowering hedgerows. The barley bows gently in an unseen breeze. The moon stitched in soft white thread glows above it all, round and steady. And all around, the hall is filled with peace. A deep, gentle peace that asks nothing but stillness and rest. Let yourself melt into that feeling. The warmth, the rhythm, the memory. Sleep waits just at the edge of this dream. Let it come, let it come. As you settle deeper into stillness, with each breath growing slower, softer, gentler, you feel yourself floating back toward the old stone hall, where time forgets to rush and the world hums and whispers. Illyra's tapestry stretches further now, its woven landscape blooming gently beneath her steady hands lush, with embroidered head, quiet wells rimmed in moss, and curling vines that cradle the shapes of old cottages. She hums as she works, a lullaby from a time when songs were shared more often than speech, and everything was passed down stitch by stitch, sigh by sigh. Tonight she threads a new scene, the village of Candlebank, where the harvest festival once shimmered, like golden firelight across the entire valley. In that forgotten autumn, the people lit floating lanterns and set them adrift on the pond, believing their dreams would rise into the sky like glowing seeds. They baked honey bread shaped like sickles, and young lovers wove their wishes into wheat crowns. They hid in the barley stacks, hoping the moon might hear. Illyra threads the pond now, its ripples captured in threads of pearlescent, blue-gray silk, and lanterns bloom across its surface, tiny dots of light so soft they seem to flicker right there in your mind. And as her needle glides in and out of the linen, you feel the hush of that festival night, children laughing in the distance, the slow lap of water on stone, the distant toll of a bell from the chapel on the hilland. All of it wraps around you like a cloak of quiet warmth, the kind of warmth that loosens your limbs and sinks into your ribs, the kind that makes your breath match the slow rocking of the world, the kind that lets your thoughts grow lighter than softer, until they begin to float like those lanterns above the water drifting into the silver sky where sleep waits with open arms. Now the hush deepens, and the candle in Illyra's chamber burns lower, its golden pool of wax forming a slow, sleepy sigh against the cool stone sill as the fire murmurs in the hearth like an old friend, speaking in dreams, and all around her loom the threads shimmer with quiet life, whispering the stories they now contain, soft as breath, delicate as morning mist, because tonight Illyra is threading the tale of the still orchard, a grove planted long ago by villagers who believed apples carried the memory of every season, and that their seeds held dreams yet unspoken. And as her fingers guide a pale green thread across the linen, the orchard begins to unfold, row upon row of gnarled, wise trees heavy with fruit, their leaves turned copper in the dusk of late summer. The air between their branches filled with the hum of bees and the distant sound of flute song. Because in this part of the story, it is near the harvest equinox, when the days and nights share the sky in equal measure, and the people come with quiet feet to walk the orchard paths, leaving offerings wrapped in ribbon at the base of certain trees, herbs for health, bits of bread, whispers of thanks. And Illyra, who was just a girl when she first stepped between those trees, remembers how the world seemed to hold its breath beneath that canopy of gold, how each step crunched gently on fallen leaves, how her grandmother whispered, "Listen closely, for the oldest trees still murmur if the wind is kind." And Illyra had tilted her head and swore she'd heard something, not words, but a sound like contentment, like the earth sighing with full belly and grateful heartened. So she threads each tree with care, giving the bark texture from twisted thread, and glinting the apples with the faintest glimmer of ruby silk, and the stillness that fills her hall as she weaves. This part of the story is deep, almost sacred, the kind of silence that holds you rather than empties. You're the kind that cradles your breath and makes it slow, so slow, matching the gentle rhythm of her needle dipping in and and out, in and out. And as you listen now, as you imagine those orchard rows bathed in golden light, you begin to feel the air sweeten in your lungs, tinged with the scent of apples and earth and soft wood smoke from a distant cottage window, and above you clouds drift like soft fleece across a sky the color of pewter and blush. And just ahead on the path, a small wooden stool waits beneath the bough, where a child once sat with a tin pail and a crooked grin, plucking apples gently and humming to the rhythm of her heartbeat. And the world at that moment was nothing but warmth and wind and the crisp snap of fruit in the palm. And Alira threads her own memory into this orchard now, just as she threads the girl-less laughter into the linen with a curve of pale yellow silk, weaving it like sunlight caught between the branches, and that joy, that calm, trickles outward from the tapestry like a breath through your bones, loosening tension from the crown of your head down to the arches of your feet, until even your thoughts feel distant and dream-soft, like petals floating downstream. And you realize, as you drift just a little further now, that this is more than a story. It is a place, and you are welcome here, barefoot on the orchard path, brushing your fingers along branches as you walk in. No hurry at all, your mind quiet, your breath steady. The leaves above you rustling gently in the rhythm of the loom, and in the distance beyond the last row of trees you glimpse the silver edge of a river, smooth and beside it, a figure in a shawl, tending to bundles of wild herbs, laying them out on linen to dry in the sun. And this too is part of the tapestry, part of Elira's memory, and she threads it into the edge of the grove with a touch of sage-green wool, remembering how her aunt taught her that thyme and vervain, dried under a waning moon, made the finest teas for easing troubled sleep. And you can almost smell the mix of herbs now: lemon balm, a hint of rosemary, and the scent lingers in the back of your mind like a lullaby, like the feeling of warm hands pressing gently against your temples as someone whispers, "You are safe. You are home. You are loved." And as Alira adds the final thread to this section, her fingers pause just briefly, resting against the loom as the silence lengthens and deepens once again, and the tapestry glows in the firelight. Rows of barley, moonlit planting, drifting lanterns, the still orchard, and now the calm riverbank of it, connected by the thread of story and the hush of memory. And you, dear dreamer, are woven into it too, because every listener becomes part of the tale, held gently in the spaces between each knot, and stitch, your breath becoming slower now, deeper, warmer, like the tide easing onto soft sand, like the turning of the season toward rest, and you feel yourself being gently wrapped in quiet, in calm, in a sleep deeper than night, while Alira begins to gather her next threads, ready to tell the next part of the tapestry's tale. And so, as the flame in the hearth softens to a low golden cradle, and the candle's tip bows with a weight of its own flicker, Alira gently threads a new strand into the growing tapestry. This one a dusky plum-colored silk, soft and rich, like the color of twilight seen through rain-washed windows. And the story now leans toward the edge of the season, to that brief and sacred time known to the villagers as the fade, when autumn stretches itself out in golden slowness, and the first breath of winter sighs at the edges of the world, not to rush it, but to remind the land to begin its sleep. And Alira remembers those weeks with a tenderness that slides into every motion of her hand, weaving slow skies and low fog into the tapestry with quiet reverence. Because the fade was never spoken of loudly, only felt in the shortening of days, in the cooling of the soil beneath bare heels, in the way the trees held their last leaves, with both grace and surrender. And she weaves a memory of a morning when the mist curled low across the fields like a shawl made of breath, and the bells in the chapel rang slow and soft, not to summon but to soothe. And in that silence, the villagers walked together, not as a parade, not as a festival, but in small pairs and threes, each holding a bundle of seed heads, dried flowers, and faded leaves, which they tucked gently into the soil of the last harvested field, giving thanks for what had grown and letting go of what had not. And Alira, then a young woman with thread already living in her blood, knelt in the turned earth beside her mother and laid down 3 tiny bundles. One for the harvest, one for the stories that had blossomed beside it, and one for the dreams that had not yet ripened. And now, as her older hands weave this moment into the tapestry, she threads the people's silhouettes in muted earth, tones warm ochres, worn greens, and soft browns that melt into the background like memories themselves, each figure humble, and in between them shall knots tiny glints of wheat gold and garnet, little sparks of gratitude stitched into the land. And as you breathe in, dear listener, you might feel a little of that moment settle into your chest. Not heavy, no, but light and grounding, like standing barefoot on warm soil after rain, the kind that makes you pause and listen to nothing in particular, just to the way the world exists when no one is trying to change it. And in Alira's hall, the fire leans sideways, crackling in a long stretch of sound like the settling of an old tree, while outside, unseen but always present, the wind moves gently through the thatched eaves and carries with it the scent of distant pine and coming frost. And you are safe in this hush, in this timeless hall, where no hour is urgent and no thought is pressing. And the tapestry, now half complete, begins to hum, faintly, not with noise, or with presence, as though the memories woven into it breathe in rhythm with your own chest, slow and sure and content. And Alira smiles softly, her eyes tracing the threads she's laid down. And in her mind she hears the old chant that was whispered during the fade, a chant without words, just a melody passed down like a secret sigh, a song that rose from throats barely open, meant more to comfort the land than to entertain the ear. And that tune slips into your mind now, faint and distant, carried not by music but by feeling, a gentle rising and falling like the breath of soil beneath a sleeping sky. And as it wraps around you, warm and patient, you feel your thoughts drift like leaves in a shallow stream, carried not away but inward, toward the core of stillness, where stories nest and sleep grows deep. And Alira, quiet and unhurried, begins choosing the next thread, one as pale as winter's first snow, ready to stitch the coming frost into the story. But not yet, not quite yet, for this part of the tale still rests in the arms of autumn, still holds the softness of twilight winds, and cider steam and woolen cloaks shared between friends, walking home beneath skies, dimmed just enough to show the first evening stars. And those stars, yes, she will stitch those 2 tiny silver knots, barely larger than a pinhead scattered across a sky of indigo wool that folds above the fields, like a hush held in the heavens. And you, dear dreamer, feel that hush all around you. Now that sense of sacred pause before the world shifts, and you let go of your breath once more, slowly, fully, and let the quiet carry you into the folds of sleep's soft embrace, as the lyra threads another knot into memory's cloth and begins, so gently, to hum again. And now, with the fire in the hearth, a soft red glow, and the air within the stone hall growing thicker with the perfume of smoldering cedar and aged wool, Alira draws close, a thread so pale it nearly vanishes in her fingers, a thread the color of first frost on morning grass, of breath against the winter windowpane. And as she begins to weave it into the tapestry, a new scene begins to form, not loud, not sudden, but slow and certain, like dawn rising behind snow-covered hills. And this scene belongs to the first snowfall, to that quiet morning when the village awoke to find the world wrapped in silence so complete. It felt like the earth itself was holding its breath, and she weaves that hush into every corner of the scene. The still rooftops covered in thick white, the crooked fence posts, crowned in powdered frost, the trees frozen in posture, as if caught mid. And in the middle of this white-drenched world she threads a little cottager childhood home with chimney smoke curling like a ribbon into the sky, and around it tiny boot prints, looping in circles left by the younger Alira, as she searched the snowy garden for signs of winter fairies, believing with all her heart, as children do, that the frost patterns on the window panes were messages from another world, from tiny spirits who crept through the dark to trace stories with their fingers on glass. And her grandmother never corrected her, only wrapped her in a shawl, teeing into her hands, and whispered, "Look closely next time. Sometimes they leave answers." And so Alira learned to watch the frost with reverence, to wake early and sit by the window, breathing slow, so she wouldn't fog the pain, her little eyes wide, as they followed the delicate fern-like patterns that etched themselves across the glass like silken runes. And now, in the tapestry, she threads those frost spirals, using the thinnest silk she owns. So delicate they shimmer, only when the light moves just right, like secrets hidden in snow. And beside the cottage, she stitches a circle of stone small, an ancient where villagers used to leave bowls of warm milk and bread crusts for the cold ones. Winter spirits believed to keep watch over the village through the long dark, and whether they were real or not, it never mattered, because the act of offering was its own warmth, its own story. And now, as Alira continues to weave, the village comes to life in its stillness. Icicles dripping slow from eaves, birds fluffed up on empty trees, and candlelight flickering in windows where hands hold steaming mugs and heads lean together to share tales of sunlit days. And the entire world seems slower, dreamlike, wrapped in layers of wool and quiet. And you, listening now, begin to feel that same stillness wrap around you, soft and white and endless, like a snowfall that hushes everything it touches. And you find your breath has slowed again, your limbs heavier, like your body is resting beneath a blanket of snowflakes, each one silent, each one gentle, falling one after another with no sound but peace. And Alira hums low again, the melody, the same one her grandmother sang during winter's deepest nights. Not a tune to cheer, but to comfort, to remind the heart that even the quietest seasons hold stories worth telling. And her voice, though aged, still carries that lull, that soft arc of sound that wraps around the soul like mittens on tiny fingers. And as her needle dips in and out of the fabric, she begins to shape the moon once again, this time in its waning form, thin as a silver eyelash, hanging low over the sleeping fields. And under that moon she threads a row of winter cabbages, stubborn and green against the white, a symbol of endurance whispered between generations. And you feel that message seep into you now, not loud, not urgent, but calm and strong. That resting is part of growing, that stillness is sacred, and that even in silence the world continues to turn gently beneath your feet. And as the fire sighs again in the hearth, and a gust of wind brushes against the hall with a sound like distant wings, you feel yourself tipping ever deeper into warmth and quiet and story, like drifting beneath layers of memory that are not only Alira's, but your own, as if somewhere in your bones you to remember the cottage, the frost, the hush of snow, and the long, slow nights where dreams moved like smoke through slanted beams of moonlight. And as Alira knots one final thread in this scene, the tapestry seems to shimmer again, not with movement but with presence, a steady, quiet presence that holds you in a place where time is unimportant and only rest matters, only breath, only calm. And so you breathe again, long and soft, and let yourself drift once more. And now the flame in the hearth leans even lower, a curl of emberlight flickering along the edge of Alira's weathered loom, casting faint, warm shadows that move across the thread like drifting whispers. And as our hand selects the next strand of thread of soft rust and bronze, the color of ancient copper warmed by sunlight, she smiles faintly, remembering the season of candles. That quiet turning point nestled just after the deepest frost and before the first thaw, when winter, though not gone, begins to loosen its grip. And in this brief pause was known as ember, when every window in the village lit a single flame at dusk, and let it burn through the night, not for light, but for remembrance, for the warmth of those who had come before, and those not yet born. And as Alira threads this warm glow into the woven hills of her tapestry, she recalls how each home would place their candle in the eastern window facing the morning and leave beside it a sprig of rosemary or dried mint to welcome in clarity, dreams, and peace. And she weaves the memory of those little altars with care. Tiny rectangles of yellow thread for flame, small knots of green for herbs, and between them all, the stillness of shared breath across the village, Because Emberturn was not a celebration of sound, but of silence, a chosen stillness, one that asked the people to sit beside their flame, alone or together, and reflect not on what was lost, but on what remained glowing, however small, however quiet. And young Elira, on her 16th sat alone in her small room with a candle of beeswax that flickered like a secret, and as the shadows moved across her wall, she had stitched her first full pattern into linen, a humble spiral of barley and stars, not perfect, but honest, and her grandmother had pressed her fingers to it, nodding slowly, saying only it holds, which was the highest praise in the house of weavers. And now, so many years later, Elira lets her fingers brush across that same spiral as it sits in the top corner of her new tapestry, woven again with practiced hands, and beneath it she threads, figures seated near firelight, their faces serene, their postures at ease, heads tilted toward quiet thought, and she weaves their homes with narrow chimneys and window panes, glowing gently, their interior suggested only by warm tones of thread, but enough to let your mind wander into them perhaps. One home has the scent of cloves in the air, or another has a hearthstone etched with old symbols, and perhaps you find yourself in one seated on a low stool near a candle whose flame sways in a breathless room, your hands wrapped around a warm mug, your thoughts slowing into nothing but flicker and flame, until even thought itself becomes soft and quiet, like snow melting on a window ledge, and Elira hums again, low and round and slow, a tune with no sharp corners, only curves, only warmth. And outside, in the world she threads, the snow has not vanished, but glows now with the orange gold of the candles, each flake catching light as if kissed by memory itself, and you begin to feel your breath sensing to the hum of it, slower now, as if your body knows it is nearing the edges of waking and entering the still glimmering threshold of dreams. And the wind brushes gently against the stone walls of our hall, not howling, not biting, but flowing like silk pulled across old wood, and the tapestry trembles ever so slightly, as if the memories within it recognize your presence, welcome it, fold around it, like a quilt of sky and soil and story. And now Elira threads the road that leaves the village, a soft path lined in brown thread and ash gray, fading toward a horizon stitched in mauve and pearl, and she places there a traveler's shape, small and cloaked, moving not fast but with steady steps, walking into the next season, the next tale. And she thinks to herself not aloud, just inside the rhythm of her breath, that stories do not end, only soften, only settle. And that sleep too is not an ending, but a weaving of rest into the loom of waking. And so she knots the final loop of thread in this scene and leans back, her hands resting on her lap, her breath steady and full of hush. And in that moment, the tapestry feels alive, not with movement, but with presence, as if every golden sheep, every frost-painted branch, every whispered memory of lanterns and harvest moons and fading embers breathes with you now, and you feel yourself wrapped once more in that hush, that golden hush that softens even the edges of thought. And as your breath rises and falls, you drift further, deeper, calmer, held in the woven dream of fields that have no end. And now, with the warmth of the hearth whispering low and steady behind her, Elira lifts her eyes to the higher threads of the tapestry, where sky begins to take shape above the fields and rooftops and orchards. She is already still, and with slow, deliberate breath, she selects a thread of dusky violet, a twilight hue that holds the hush of distant hills and the mystery of stars not yet revealed. And as her fingers slide it into the fabric, she begins to weave the evening sky knot, a sky full of brilliance or show, but one softened by dusk, where clouds glide like forgotten thoughts, and birds wing quietly toward their roosts. And this part of the story is one of watchers, of those who stood still long enough to hear what the skies said back. And she remembers the village astronomer, old Marnan, who would sit cross-legged on the chapel roof at sunset, wrapped in a cloak too thin for the season, holding a brass astrolabe and whispering numbers under his breath like prayers. and children would lie in the tall grass below and listen, lulled, not by understanding, but by the rhythm of his voice and the comfort that someone, somewhere, was paying attention to the stars. And Alira, as a girl, would sneak her sketchbook to the foot of the chapel steps, drawing not the sky, but the shape of Marnane's profile against it, the gentle stoop of his back, the steady lift of his hand as he traced invisible arcs across the firmament. And now, in thread, she renders him as a small, dark figure perched atop a slate roof, with silver lines arching above him, faint and curved, like the memory of movement, representing the paths he swore. The stars danced along, and within those arcs, she not small points of pale light stars, not blazing, but blinking softly, rhythmically, as if in conversation. And this, she thinks, is the part of the tapestry that sings most gently to the sleeper, because the sky has always spoken best when no one interrupts, and her needle moves with reverence, tracing soft spirals and constellations known only to Thistledale, the sleeping doe, the hearth. Circle the three sisters of ash, stories past in low voices, beside firelight. In one particular night she remembers a night when Marnan pointed to a cluster of stars and said that one, that flickering one, that's the keeper's eye. It only blinks when someone wishes gently. And Alira, heart fluttering like candlelight, had closed her eyes and wished for her first tapestry to be whole. Not perfect, but whole. And the next morning, her grandmother handed her a skein of thread, the exact color of moon-warmed stone, whispering, "You're ready." And now, years later, she weaves that very color into the edge of the sky, just beneath the stitched stars, a border of balance and hope and long-remembered wishes. And you, dear dreamer, you feel it too, the way the sky above her tapestry stretches gently over your thoughts, calming each one, until it floats like a feathered seed, drifting slowly across a lavender dusk. And beneath that sky, your breath grows slower, your chest rising with the same rhythm that the stitched clouds seem to carry, and all around you, the air glows with the golden violet hush of a village settling into evening, where windows are shuttered with soft thuds, where lanterns blink one by one into life, and where silence does not mean absence, but presence of peace, of safety, of something watching over from above, not sternly, but with love. And Alira threads a final touch into the evening sky, a single falling star, so small it might be mistaken for a stray thread, but she knots it with a twist of opalescent fiber, a shimmering thread only used for dreams, and she places it just above the horizon, streaking toward the barley fields, as though returning home. And you feel that movement now, a slow descent, a gentle arrival, as if part of you is settling into something long-awaited, the way a seed finds its soil, or a story finds its end. Though this tale is not ending, not yet, for the night has just begun, and Alira's tapestry is only halfway complete, yet already it holds so much. The golden sheep, the orchard, the snowfall, the firelit windows, the candles glowing at ember turn, and now above it all the stars in their slow and careful dance. And she pauses, now just briefly, her fingers resting against the linen, as her breath joins the hush in the room, and her eyes close not in sleep but in remembrance. And, too, feel your eyes begin to drift shut, not by command but by comfort, because this story does not push or pull, it simply surrounds you gently, patiently, until your breath becomes the wind across the stitched fields, and your thoughts dim into soft lights behind cottage windows, and your body still and warm becomes a quiet figure resting beneath a sky that watches kindly as the world slows and sleeps. And as the night deepens in the quiet warmth of the stone hall, with shadows stretching longer and softer across the floor, and the scent of beeswax and old wood curling gently through the air, Alira lifts a spool of thread, the color of hearthbrick, warm, muted, earthly, and, with fingers steady and sure, she begins to weave a scene from the heart of the village itself, a place called the Gathering Circle, where every season, just before the solstice, The people of Thistledale would come together not for spectacle but for sharing, each bringing something made by hand. A loaf of seed bread wrapped in linen, a carved flute shaped like a willow branch, a skein of homespun wool dyed in the colors of sunrise. And in the middle of this gathering stood the listening tree, a tall and ancient ash whose trunk was hollowed just enough to form a small alcove, where villagers would place their thoughts, written on scraps of parchment, rolled tight and tucked into the bark like soft wishes, and no one read them aloud, for they were meant for the seasons to hear for the wind, the rain, the soyland. It was said that in the spring the answers would come, not as words, but as signs. A double bloom, an early frost, a bird nesting near the chapel door. And Alira threads the image now, with the reverence of someone who once placed her own whisper into that tree. A short message written, with trembling ink. Let the harvest come safely, let the loom never fray. And as she knots the shape of the tree into the tapestry toll, stitched in soft gray wool blended with mossy greens, you can almost hear the breeze that passed through its leaves. During those dusky evenings, feel the hush of the villagers as they stood in quiet ceremony, their faces lifted, not in expectation, but in peace. And around the tree she embroiders the people in gentle circles, shoulders touching, hands clasped loosely, each one connected to the next by faint threads of color that curve and swirl like the wind itself. And these threads are not obvious, not bold, but if you look closely, if your mind, in its drifting calm, wanders through the tapestry with the slow gaze of someone watching clouds, ULLC. The shapes of connection that stretch through the story, from the firelit windows to the barley fields, from the stargazer on the chapel roof to the girl in the orchard, and now to the listening tree, where the stories gather and rest, just like you, dear dreamer, resting now in your own still circle of breath. And Alira hums, a tune softer even than before, barely more than the rhythm of her breath. And with that hum, the image in the tapestry glows faintly, not with light, but with depth, as if the thread remembers not just shape, but feeling. And your body, your quiet body, curled or stretched or tucked just so, begins to feel as if it too is being gently stitched into a story, a peaceful one, a safe one where nothing needs to be solved or done or changed, only witnessed, only breathed. And the warmth in the room deepens with the memory of so many hands touching cloth, shaping dough, tending sheep, humming songs to seeds planted by moonlight. And Alira now threads the final circle around the base of the tree, a ring of stones gathered from the riverbank, worn smooth by centuries, each one stitched with a different shade of gray and sand, a small echo of permanence in a world that moves slowly but never stops saying. She smiles faintly, not with triumph, but with the soft satisfaction of remembrance. And outside, the wind carries the faintest sound of chimes, little bells, strung on the eaves, ringing not with urgency but with rhythm, like distant lullabies, borne on air. And as your breath matches that rhythm, you feel yourself drawn closer to the heart of this woven world. Your thoughts quieter now, your body looser, lighter, as though you too have left a message tucked in the tree's hollow, and the tree has wrapped your wish in bark and silence, holding it gently until the season knows how to answer. And so you breathe again, deeply now, and let yourself be part of the hush that surrounds the gathering circle. The kind of hush that wraps not just around your limbs, but around your very thoughts, lulling them into stillness, where only softness remains. And the flicker of story weaves itself deeper into your dreaming mind. And now, as the hours drift past unnoticed, and the world beyond the walls of the weaving hall lies still beneath its blanket of slumbering stars, Alira reaches for a thread the color of morning mist, pale, with a softness that catches no light but somehow glows from within, and with her breath, a gentle hush, she begins to shape the slowest scene yet, one that holds no grand festival, no gathering or planting, but something even more sacred, the daily rhythm of care, the unnoticed moments that carry a village quietly from one season to the next. And in her tapestry she threads the figure of a woman kneeling beside a stone basin, wringing out linens by hand. her sleeves damp, her brow calm, and beside her a child scoops water with a carved ladle, letting it spill slowly onto a small garden bed where mint and chamomile grow in careful rows, and beyond them an older man stands with a spindle in his palm, twisting flax into cord, his shadow falling across a row of clay jars left open to dry. And none of them speak, yet the silence they share is full of presence, of routine, of that steady love which has no name but can be seen in every small task, the folding of cloth, the scraping of ash from a fire grate, the tying of bundles for tomorrow's stew, and Alira's fingers echo those tasks, now, weaving each simple movement with reverence, her needle dipping like the ladle, pulling like the spindle, sweeping like the hand that smooths a child's unruly hair. And around these figures, she threads the home itself, not in sharp lines, but soft corners of cottage, whose shape is defined more by the warmth it contains than the walls it is made of, with bread rising on the sill, herbs drying from the rafters, and a cat curled in a sunbeam beside a woven basket. And it is here, in this quietest corner of the tapestry, that the stillness becomes deepest, like the bottom of a calm lake, where no ripples reach, and even time seems to pause. And as you drift further into this scene, you begin to feel it within yourself, that same rhythm, that sacred repetition, where your breath is a ladle pouring, your heartbeat a spindle turning, and your thoughts slow to match the pace of these steady souls who ask for nothing but the quiet satisfaction of tending, of mending, of preparing for tomorrow with hands that know the worth of every motion. And Alira adds a thread of soft gold now, just a shimmer, tracing the edge of the window where morning light filters through, not loudly, but like a promise. And in that light, she weaves the suggestion of steam rising from a teacup, the faint scent of lavender and lemon balm curling into the air. And it feels, to you now, like you're sitting just inside that cottage, with wool across your lap and warmth along your shoulders, the kind of warmth that seeps in slowly and stays, not urgent, not demanding, only there, loyal as shadow. And somewhere nearby, someone is humming, not Alira this time, but perhaps one of the figures in the tapestry. Or maybe it's just the memory of a lullaby that once lived in this house, and that hum wraps around your ribs like a blanket, loosening everything, every tight place inside you beginning to release. And Alira threads one final shape in the scene. A pair of shoes left by the door, dusted with dirt from the garden, their laces untied as if the one who wore them will return soon from a short walk. And it's that detail, that small, tender truth that makes the whole cottage feel alive, as if the scene is not a memory at all, but a moment happening right now, unfolding just behind your eyelids, ready to welcome you into it. And perhaps it already has, for you can feel the warmth of the hearth on your skin, the scent of bread in the air, and the soft creak of wood underfoot as the floor shifts slightly beneath well-worn soles. And the world inside you has quieted almost completely now, your body so light, so grounded, that your breath moves without effort, like wind through open curtains, and your thoughts have become gentle visitors, entering and leaving like butterflies, welcomed, but no longer needing to stay. And Alira leans back just slightly now, letting the weight of her memories settle into the thread she's laid, and she closes her eyes briefly, not in sleep, but in stillness. And the fire beside her flutters low, its glow pulsing like the heart of the house, steady and calm. And outside, though the stars wheel slowly overhead, nothing feels hurried, nothing presses forward, for everything needed is already here, quietly stitched into place. And now, with the tapestry resting heavier on the loom, and the hall holding a silence so gentle it feels like velvet in the air, Alira reaches for a spool of thread tinted with soft rosewood and dusky plum, the color of memories that arrive at twilight and stay just long enough to warm the heart, before slipping back into the folds of silence. And with her shoulders still and her breathing deep, she begins to weave the path beyond the village, a winding trail that leads to the old stone chapel. There rests like a secret at the edge of the forest, a place not abandoned but hushed, where ivy curls up through cracks in the mortar and the bells though long silence still sway faintly when the wind is in the right mood. And she remembers walking that path many times as a girl, not for sermon or rite, but for the peace that lived there, for the way the birds always sang more softly among the birch trees, as if they too had learned to whisper their songs. And so she threads that trail now, stitching each curve and bend with long arcs of earth-tone fiber, laying it between hills she's already woven, letting it wind slowly beneath boughs that stretch across the path in cathedral-like arches. And there, where the moss grows thickest and the light thins to a honeyed hush, she begins to weave the chapel, not grand, not towering, but simple and worn, a place shaped not by design, but by time and touch. And she knots its roof with slate gray, its walls with muted stone, and just inside the arched doorway she places a single candle, still burning, still watched, for someone always returns to tend it. And as she threads the flickering gold, Elira recalls the stories her grandmother once whispered, that the chapel was built when the village was young, using stone pulled from the riverbank by hand, and that each family placed something beneath its foundational lock of hair, a strand of thread, a carved button, tokens of their lives, so the chapel would never forget them. And the wind, they said, remembered too, for it carried voices through the rafters in winter and cool comfort through the pews in summer. And now, as your mind drifts down that same forest path, you can feel the cool press of moss under your feet, the filtered light falling in soft gold lines across your shoulders. And as the chapel comes into view in your imagination, it welcomes you without question, as if it has always been waiting, a place of return, a place where no words are needed and every breath is enough. And inside, the stillness is so complete that even your heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of the flame, steady and soft and true. And you sit upon one of the benches, feeling the wood smooth beneath your hand, smelling the faint traces of lavender and beeswax and age, and above, through a narrow window stitched in Elira's careful thread, you see the sky in deepening indigo, a few stars blinking like gentle thoughts. And in that moment, you feel something settle deep inside you, something that had fluttered for days or weeks, something restless now, folding its wings and sighing into stillness. And as Elira's needle moves, she adds a final shape to this Sina book, resting on the chapel's small altar, open but unread, its pages blank but glowing faintly. And this book, she thinks, is not for doctrine or record, but for dreams, the kind that rise not from sleep, but from the hush between breaths. And she threads that glow with a pale opal fiber nearly invisible, so only those looking with quiet eyes will see it. And maybe you see it now, even as your own eyes begin to drift heavier beneath their lids, even as your limbs lie still and wrapped in warmth, because the story has softened every edge within you, and the world has shrunk gently to the size of your breath, to the slow turning of the wheel on Elira's loom. And outside the chapel, the wind moves gently through the birch trees again, carrying no chill, only lullabies, only memory. And as she ties off the thread, Elira rests her hand over the woven chapel, letting it linger, letting it settle. And in the flickering half-light of the hall, the tapestry no longer looks like cloth, but like a world paused in prayer. And now, with only a few threads left resting in the wooden dish beside her loom, and the fire in the hearth dwindling into the gentle hush of coals, Elira closes her eyes for a moment, her fingers hovering above the woven fields, as if listening for the final stories that wish to be told. And when a hand moves again, it chooses a thread of soft twilight green, the color of new leaves at dusk, and she begins to weave the edge of the forest, a place where fields give way to deeper stillness, where sunlight breaks into slender shafts, and the air smells of fern, bark, and the slow breath of earth that has never hurried for anyone. And as the thread moves through the linen, she remembers the forest days, held once a year when the children were led in quiet procession beneath the trees, guided by elders who spoke only in gesture and low song. For it was believed that too many words would disturb the gentle folk spirits, not feared, but deeply respected, who watched over the woods. And Elira was one of those children once, her small hand tucked inside her aunt's, walking barefoot over soft pine needles, her ears open to every rustle, every bird song, every creak of a distant branch. And it was on that walk that she saw, for the first time, the stone circle, hidden deep among mossy stumps and bluebell clusters, a ring of lichen-covered stones that curved like a sleeping animal curled into itself, and the elder leading them, old Grella, with her voice like wind in tall grass had, knelt beside the largest stone and whispered, "Here lies the memory of rain," and told them how the stones were believed to hold the moods of the land itself, soaking up joy and sorrow, drought and abundance. And Alira had placed her palm upon the stone and felt something, not a word, not a story, but a hum, a presence, a slow and ancient patience that she never forgot. And now she weaves that stone circle carefully into the lower right corner of her tapestry, its placement precise, as though the whole story might unravel if it were moved. And around it she threads young figures sitting cross-legged in reverent stillness, their heads bowed, their eyes wide, while leaves drift quietly down around them like forgotten blessings. And into the air, above this glade, she stitches soft arcs of silver thread barely visible, like threads of breath curving, gently from stone to tree to child. The invisible lines of memory pass through silence, and you, dear dreamer, find yourself walking there now, in your thoughts, barefoot along the forest path, the ground beneath your feet cool and soft and alive, the scent of moss rising like a lullaby, the light slanting golden green through tall, watchful branches. And as you reach the stone circle, you lower yourself into the grass without effort, your body already knowing how to fold into stillness. And the hush that surrounds you is not empty, but full of presence, full of old knowing, full of stories that do not speak, but sing low beneath the skin. And your breath, slow and warm, begins to match the rhythm of the trees, the slow exhale of the land. And you feel, just faintly, as though the forest itself has wrapped you in quiet, not to hide you, but to welcome you. And as Alira's needle dips in and out of the cloth, her breath remains steady, slow, joined now to the breath of the forest she is remembering. And in the hall, the final candle flickers against the far wall, casting shadows that sway like branches in a gentle wind. And she knots one last thread into this scene. Fawn curled at the edge of the clearing, its ears twitching in sleep, its body stitched in the soft brown velvet thread, as if it too dreams of moss and leaf and song. And she rests her hands in her lap, gazing down at the forest she has brought to life, and her lips curve into a soft, knowing smile. For this part of the tapestry was always meant to be quiet, and now that it is woven, the hush in the room deepens again, wrapping tighter around you like a shawl of sleep, and you feel yourself held, not just in the story, but in the soil of it, as if your thoughts had roots, and those roots had grown calm, and all that remains now is the lull between dreams. And now, with the edges of the tapestry gently curling inward like petals, preparing for night and the silence in the hall, thick as a woolen blanket, Alira lifts her gaze once more, and selects a thread she has saved until nearly the end, a thread of soft moon, tinged faintly with the blush of dawn like dew resting on the tip of a petal before the sun stirs them. As she threads it through the eye of her needle, the air in the room seems to hush even further, as though holding its breath for what this final light might reveal. And slowly, patiently, she begins to stitch the sky, not as it is seen, but as it is felt just before waking, that veil between sleeping and rising when dreams begin to blur and stretch and time becomes soft around the edges. And she threads the horizon now with that hue, the space between night and morning, not quite either, where the land rests beneath a light that belongs to both realms. And into this she begins to weave the memory meadow, a quiet field that only appears in dreams and old songs, a place where all the forgotten moments gather like seeds that never sprouted, not lost, but simply resting, waiting. And in the tapestry, this meadow lies just beyond the forest glade, its grasses gently rippling in shades of silver and palest green, and scattered among them Alira threads, the shapes of objects left behind, A single glove, a doll's head with soft braids, a book whose pages flutter in a breeze that has no source. And between these are flowers, many of them real ones. Chamomile, yarrow, blue thistlebutt. Others are imagined, stitched from her own memory. The spark, the night soft, lanternweed, and the tiny moon. A flower that only opens when a child falls asleep near it. And she threads these blooms, not in neat rows, but in the natural scattering of dreams, where nothing grows in lines, only in longing. And this place, this memory meadow, was said by the villagers to lie just at the edge of sleep, where the dreamers go when they need to rest without remembering, to breathe without effort, to wander without worry. And Elira recalls being told that those who woke with no dreams often visited the meadow, their minds having chosen the kind of peace that does not need a tale to carry. And now, as she weaves it, she allows that silence to fill her too, her needle slowing, her body softening, her breath falling into that same dreamy rhythm. And as you, dear listener, drift deeper now, you begin to feel that you are walking through that very meadow. Each step soft and weightless, each breath sweet with the scent of grass, warmed by moonlight. And ahead of you lies a low hill stitched into the center of the tapestry, just tall enough to sit upon and gaze up at the sky. Elira is still weaving where constellations shift with the pace of thought, and the moon floats low, full and drowsy. And when you settle at the crest of that hill, you notice something just beside you. A tiny figure stitched in ivory thread, her hair in a long braid, her hands resting on her knees, watching the same stars you see now. And though she does not speak, you feel the calm of her presence, a companion in stillness, someone who has walked the fields and forests of the tapestry and come here, just like you, to rest. And as your eyes close a little more, you feel the meadow lifting you, not upward, but inward, as though the air itself is rocking you, gently, slowly, like a lullaby held between petals. And Elira places one final thread across the edge of the scene, curve of silk that connects the memory meadow to every other part of the tapestry. The candlelit homes, the barley fields, the orchard, the chapel, the forest, and now this place where dreams come to nest stand. The thread glows faintly, just enough to be seen if one is looking with their heart, and she breathes in deeply. Not to speak, not to finish, but simply to mark the quiet joy of knowing that the story she has woven now holds a space where even forgetting is a kind of love. And the meadow, stitched and silent, breathes with you now, its soft rhythm guiding you, ever closer to the last folds of sleep, where everything is known not in words, but in stillness. And now, with the last thread poised between her fingers, and the room around her wrapped in the quiet that only deepest night can bring, Elira draws in a long, slow breath, letting it settle in her chest like warm tea in a cup. And she selects a single strand of undyed wool, the color of breath, of silence, of the space between dreams. And with hands that know this final movement by heart, she threads it through the needle and begins the last touch of the tapestry. A spiral soft and slow that begins near the center of the cloth and wends its way outward, touching each scene, each memory, each thread of golden sheep and moon-planted barley, of orchard mist and chapel hush, of stars blinking above old rooftops, and forest stones humming with the patience of seasons. And this spiral, though simple in shape, is the thread that binds them all, the unspoken truth beneath the stories, the breath beneath the voice, the moment of stillness at the very edge of sleep. And she weaves it not with speed but with reverence, each loop embracing what came before it, each curve resting gently against the one beside it. And as it unfurls across the linen, it begins to glow not with light, but with memory, a quiet warmth that lives only in the space between thought and feeling. And as she reaches the edge of the spiral, Elira knots the final loop, ties it in place with a sigh that is not of sorrow, but of completeness, and sets her needle down beside the loom, her fingers still resting lightly on the tapestry, as if unwilling to leave it just yet. And you, dear listener, still drifting inside the folds of that woven world, feel the story begin to settle inside you, not as a tale to remember, but as a softness in your breath, a warmth in your chest, the hush that follows a lullaby, the pause after the final note, and you find yourself back in the center of that dream-touched field, lying in the grass where starlight leans low to kiss your brow. And above you, the sky stretches wide and kind and endless, and you know that every stitch a lyra made still hums beneath your skin, every candle, flame and frost-touched branch, and ripple of moonlit barley, still breathing, still keeping time with the rise and fall of your quiet, resting body. And somewhere, far away but not truly far away, just at the edge of your awareness, the loom is still, the hearth glows soft, and the tapestry, now complete, hangs from beam to beam, not as a decoration, but as a world stitched together with memory, season, silence, and sleep. And in this world there is nothing you need to do, nothing to hold, nothing to remember, only this breath and the next, each one slower, deeper, lighter. And as your eyes close fully now, and the final hush wraps itself around your limbs, like a blanket passed from mother to child, you drift into that place where stories become dreams, where dreams become sleep, and where sleep, at last, becomes peace. And so, the hush deepens, not as a descent, but as an unfolding, a soft unfurling, like petals opening in slow motion at the farthest edge of a meadow, untouched by even the gentlest breeze, and in this quiet where the tapestry no longer needs to be woven, but still gently hums its remembered rhythm. The dream breathes onward, a continuation that does not follow, but simply is. And somewhere beneath the stitched canopy of stars, and beside the barley fields, stitched in golden thread, a little woven cottage door opens with a sigh, and out steps the child again, the one who wandered quietly through forest and glade, chapel and meadow only. Now their gaze turns upward toward a sky stitched in deeper velvet blues, where the constellations shift like thoughts passing through the calm of the mind just before sleep, and they carry with them something new. A bundle of threads, not yet used, small strands of every color: lavender, dusk, and candlelight, yellow frost, white and moss, green barley, gold, and cloud gray, one soft as breath and warm as memory. And they walk slowly across the hills, with their bare feet pressing lightly into the textured earth of the tapestry, not altering it, only touching, only being part of it. And as they reach the old tree near the center, the one whose roots tangle softly around the stone circle, and whose canopy holds the hush of generations, they sit beneath it and begin to braid the threads in their lap, not in a rush, not with a goal, but as a way to join the story that lives in the fabric around them. And with every twist of their fingers, the wind seems to shift, gently curling around their shoulders like a shawl, carrying the scent of memories from places the tapestry hasn't shown yet, somehow still knows, perhaps, the salt of sea air from a harbor never stitched, or the cool sweetness of rain falling on slate roofs far beyond the village, or the scent of pine wood fires in homes where voices hum in other tongues, other stories, yet all sharing the same gentle heartened. As the braid grows longer, the child begins to hum, not a song they learned, but one that seems to rise from the braid itself, a tune so soft it could be mistaken for a breeze, or the settling of dust, or the way eyelids lower when sleep comes slowly and sweetly. And as that humming carries outward, the tapestry seems to respond not with movement, but with a soft shimmering of warmth that rolls gently through the woven hills and stitched fields, like a sigh that has waited a long time to be released. And the golden sheep raise their tiny heads and blink, not startled but stirred. And in the cottage, windows a light glows faintly brighter, as though someone just returned home and placed another log on the fire. And in the river, the lanterns bobbed a little more brightly, as if remembering the wishes whispered into their flames before they were set adrift. And all of its every thread, every tiny detail, stitched with loving patience, leans gently toward the child and the braid they are making, recognizing it not as new, but as a continuation, a weaving forward. And far away in the quiet hall, where Lyra once sat with straight back and soft hands, the loom now rests in the golden hush of morning, its thread stilled, its wheel unmoving, But the tapestry's still warm, still breathing with memory, and beside it lies a folded cloth, new, but unfinished, as though someone had just begun their first stitch, before setting it down to greet the sunrise. And perhaps this is the truth that no ending can hide. That story stitched with care, continue beyond the last word. That every listener becomes a weaver in time, holding in their hands a handful of threads gathered from dreams and silence and star, ready to begin again. Not from the start, but from wherever the hush leads them. And as the child ties the final knot in the braid, they lift it softly to the sky, and it floats upward not with wings, not with magic, but with belonging, as if the very sky itself had been waiting to carry one more strand, one more song, and above them, the spiral stitched in the sky of the tapestry. The same one. Illyra finished before laying her hands to rest, glows just slightly, like a breath drawn in and slowly released, and the spiral receives the braid and tucks it gently into its curve, where it glows like a tiny star. Not bright, not loud, but steady. And you, dear dreamer, feel that glow now behind your closed eyes. That tiny warmth tucked gently into the spiral of your own thoughts. That thread added to your own story, so softly that you might not notice until one quiet day when your hands reach for a pen, or a needle, or a word, and something flows from you that feels like memory and hope and hush all braided together. And in that moment, you will know you were part of the tapestry all along. And though the story has long since loosened its final thread, and the loom lies in golden stillness beside the embers of memory, the dream continues not as something that insists on being told, but as something that hums softly in the folds of silence. And in that hush, the world within the tapestry breathes on, not changing, not paused, simply being, and somewhere between the stitched folds of the memory meadow and the braided roots of the listening tree, a soft rain begins to fall. Not from storm clouds, not from sorrow, but from a sky made of sleep and soft knowing. And each raindrop is warm and slow and carries the echo of stories untold, moments that were never loud enough to be shared, but too sacred to be forgotten. And as the rain touches the stitched earth, it does not soak or chill, but melts gently into the fabric, like ink into parchment, leaving behind glimmers of new growth, tiny sprouts, rising from the moss beside the chapel stones, silver fungi blossoming on the underside of the forest logs, the soft blush of roses budding along the edge of the window in the weaveress cotigond. You, dear dreamer, feel this rain too, not on your skin, but somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath your thoughts, like the slow settling peace that comes after a long-held breath is finally released. And the child with the braid of many threads now walks the path in quiet joy, barefoot steps, trailing faint shimmer where the rain and story meet. And in their hands, they carry a bundle of gathered tokens, not treasure, not keepsakes, but small things filled with meaning. A button lost during the festival of lanterns, a tuft of wool from a golden sheep's shearing, a scrap of ribbon from the chapel's candle blessing, and a pebble smoothed by the river that carried wishes out beyond the fields. And they do not hurry, for in this world there is no hurry, only rhythm. And as they walk the gentle curve of the land, the rain slowly lessens and the mist begins to lift, revealing something not new, but long hidden. A second loom, much smaller, tucked beneath the branches of an old willow tree at the very edge of the woven world. And beside it rests a chair, empty and patient, facing the rising light of a dawn that blooms not with brilliance, but with warmth, a soft flush of pale gold and peachy lavender spreading across the stitched horizon like sleep stretching awake. And as the child approaches, they place their tokens gently beside the loom, and for a moment they simply sit, their breath sinking with the stillness, their heart humming with all the places they've wandered within this world of thread and story. And then, in a gesture that feels like exhale, they lift a strand of soft sky-colored yarn from a waiting spool and begin the first stitch, not with perfection, not even with certainty, but with love. And in that moment, the world feels whole, not because it is finished, but because it is being continued, not repeated, but remembered. and that remembering wraps itself gently around you, dear listener, like a lullaby you heard before you even had words. And perhaps you realize now that this story was never just never only thread and field, but something older, something slower, something passed hand to hand in firelight and dusk, something that waits quietly for a heart soft enough to listen. And here you are, listening still, breath by breath, step by step, and the field that was once endless is now also yours, stitched softly into your bones, curled into the corners of your resting thoughts, ready to return when the night is kind and your body leans once more toward sleep. Because no matter how long you walk the waking world, there will always be a path back to this place, this hush, this thread. And as the child weaves their first gentle line into the blank cloth, a flock of golden sheep appears once more at the hill's edge, grazing in calm spirals, and overhead, a bird calls once not to rouse, but to remind, and the sound drifts across the tapestry like a ripple across water, softening everything it touches, including you. And as your breath deepens once more and your mind floats gently in the quiet, tied between waking and dreaming, you carry with you this truth, stitched deep into the hush. Stories made of care never truly end. They simply become part of us, forever unfolding beneath the skin of sleep. And so the story breathes on, soft as starlight, unwinding, not forward nor back, but in widening circles like ripples upon the mind, as still water ran somewhere, just beyond the edge of what was once the last chapter. The tapestry stretches wider, not with urgency, but with invitation, as if the fabric itself has remembered a dream it longed to hold. And into this widening hush steps a new figure, neither child nor elder, but someone whose shape is made of a quiet traveler, wrapped in a weathered cloak, stitched from pieces of the tapestry itself, patches of orchard light, river mist, starlit, wool, and barley-threaded wind. And though no face can be seen beneath their soft hood, the way they walk speaks of deep listening, of steps that know how to move without disturbing the song of soil beneath. And in their hand they carry a lantern, not lit by flame but by memory, its soft glow pulsing like the beat of a story just beginning to be remembered. And this traveler does not speak, for here words are not needed, only presence, only breath, only the steady hush of being in. As they cross the meadow, the tapestry responds. Grasses shifting with a shimmer, trees bowing slightly, clouds parting to reveal a single silvery thread unfurling from the sky above. A sky that has grown deeper now, not darker, just more still, more infinite. And as the traveler moves onward, they pause near the woven chapel, now warm with a pre-dawn glow, and rest their palm on the old door. Not to knock, not to enter, but to greet what remains within every whispered wish, every candle's flicker, every moment of hush offered into the rafters like a breath sent skyward. And in return, the wood hums faintly beneath their hand, not in sound, but in sensation, a knowing that pulses through the fingers and settles into the chest like a memory just beneath waking. And then they walk once more, this time following a narrow, newly formed path that winds toward a place even a lira never stitched, a corner of the tapestry, not forgotten, only patiently waiting. And as they pass, the golden sheep raise their heads, not in alarm, but in recognition, as if they too have dreamt of this figure, this moment. And beyond the bend lies a clearing untouched until now, where the land dips into a soft bowl, and wildflowers bloom in impossible shapes, glow petals, trailing vines of silver dust that curl around themselves like lullabies. And in the center of this clearing rests a shallow pool, its surface still as polished thread, reflecting not the sky above, but the parts of the dream that live within. Flickers of forest, walks, candlelit windows, moonsoon barley, every hush and whisper and warm exhale ever dreamt within the world Alira wove. And the traveler kneels beside the pool, lowering the memorialate lantern, until its glow touches the water, and for a moment, the reflection glows gold, then blue, until finally, it matches the light behind your own eyes. Dear dreamer, the light you feel when the world quiets and sleep draws near. And as the traveler rises, they reach into the folds of their cloak and draw forth a new thread, not bright, not bold, but soft, soft as the pause between heartbeats, soft as the breath just before a child's first dream mend. They tie it gently to a low branch of the nearby willow, where it sways in the breath of the story, not demanding to be seen, only wishing to be part of the whole. And as it sways, the trees around the clearing begin to hum not music, not words, but something older. The sound of the first silence ever loved, and that sound moves through the tapestry across fields and rooftops, through chapels and gardens and glades, curling into every corner, until even the edges of the dream dissolve into peace. And the traveler turns now, their task complete, and slowly walks the path back toward the great loom where a lyra once sat, and wove the world with patience and breath. And though she is gone from the chair, her presence lives in every knot and thread. And the traveler sets the lantern down at the base of the loom, where it flickers once, then a new light to guide the next dreamer, whoever they may be. And you, floating now in the weightless space between thoughts, feel yourself becoming the silence around that loom, the breath beneath the thread, the warmth that will welcome the next hand to sit and begin again. And there is no need to rise, no need to do, only to rest, to soften, to allow this final hush to carry you deeper than ever before, into the very fold of the dream where you are no longer watching, but woven. And though the loom stands quiet and the lantern now glows faintly at its base, like the slow heart of a star cradled within the wood, something gentle begins to stir beneath the woven soil of the tapestry, not movement, not sound, but a sensation like warmth waking beneath frost, or a sigh exhaled into still morning aran. Deep within the roots of the world, where silence runs the deepest, a single pulse of silver light blooms, outward spreading through the spiral, once stitched, touching each corner of the tapestry like fingertips, brushing memories asleep in the dark. And with each place, it reaches the barley fields, the orchard paths, the chapel door, the edge of the forest glade. A new kind of stillness forms, not from emptiness, but from fullness, a stillness born of something having truly settled. And in the forest where the light filters softest through stitched leaves, the birds do not sing, but simply exist, curled within their nests, warmed by the hush. And in the village cottages, no footsteps echo, but the hearths hold embers that flicker slow and golden, watched over by shadows that feel like memories of people long at peace. And the river, which once carried floating lanterns filled with whispered wishes, now holds their reflection still and whole upon its surface, as though the water has chosen, for this moment, to become mirror, to hold the dreams that drifted so far and bring them home in silence. And somewhere just past the meadow and the glade, where the tapestry once blurred at the edges, that soft light from beneath weaves itself into a shape not of thread, nor of flesh, but of story remembered by the land itself. And that shape becomes a figure, rising slowly like steam from tea in a morning sunbeam. A presence made of calm and pause and wonder. And though it has no name, no voice, it carries with it the weightless truth that all dreams return in time, that nothing soft is ever lost, only rethreaded. And as it moves through the tapestry, it leaves no mark, no step, no shadow, only a quiet swell of comfort, like a lullaby hummed long after the child has fallen asleep. And when it reaches the loom, it pauses, not before the chair, but behind it, resting a hand not physical, but gentle nonetheless upon the back of the wood, as though to say thank you. And in that instant, the tapestry shifts not in form, but in feeling, as if the cloth itself has exhaled, after lifetimes of breath held steady, and that exhale rolls outward, past forest and field and star-stitched sky, until it reaches even you, dear dreamer, and brushes your skin like the softest breeze, through a window left open in a safe, familiar room. And you feel your breath slow once again, your chest rising only to fall, your thoughts unwinding like ribbon from a spool, And with that unraveling comes a kind of joy, not bright or sharp, but deep and drowsy. The joy of being exactly where you were always meant to be, held not in hands, but in hush. And as your eyes grow heavy again, not with fatigue, but with trust, you sense that something is settling in you too. Some part of yourself that once wandered or worried or wondered, now choosing to sit, to soften, to become still like the fields beneath the stars. And in that softness, you are not alone. For every stitch in this tapestry sings with the breath of those who listened before. You, those who wandered its golden paths, touched its frost-brushed leaves, stood before its chapel with bare feet and open palms, and now rest within its folds, carried like feathers across the dream windand. You are one of them now, not apart, not outside, but within, your presence woven into the soil, your silence tucked beside the moonlit barley, your breath part of the spiral that never ends. And though no voice calls your name, no song plays your tune, the story welcomes you just the same, because stories like this know the heart, even when it forgets itself, and they wait patiently, sweetly for the moment, when the heart remembers how to rest, how to listen, how to sleep beneath a sky, stitched with stars that blink only for you. And above the loom, just as the final threads begin to shimmer in their long quietness, one last flicker of light arches across the sky, a new line of silver thread gently drawn from horizon to horizon end. With it comes not a word, not a sound, but a feeling that lingers behind the eyelids, like the touch of someone who once held you while you dreamed. And it whispers not in your ears, but in your bones. You are home, you are safe, you are part of everything now. And with that, the light settles, the loom rests, the tapestry sleeps, and so do you. And now, beneath the hush that follows hush, in a quiet deeper than words, deeper than breath, something timeless unfurls, not with urgency, not even with intention, but like a petal opening slowly within the folds of a dreamland in this deep quiet, beyond the woven chapel, beyond the forest where moonlight slips like mist through every leaf. The tapestry breathes not with movement, but with memory, and within that memory lives a lake, not stitched before, but always waiting, a lake, as still as glass, where the sky forgets it is sky, and settles itself upon the water in perfect reflection. And here the world folds inward, becomes round, becomes held, and the light around the lake is soft and perpetual, as if the hour never moves past dawn or dusk. And perhaps both are true here, or neither. And along the lake's edge lies a ring of stones, flat and smooth, warmed not by sun, but by time. And upon one of these stones sits a small, woven creature, no taller than a folded scarf, with fur made of frayed wool, eyes sewn from tiny beads of smoky quartz, and a tail curved like the hook of a question never asked. And it does not move. Not really. But its presence is real, and in its stillness, there is awareness and kindness, and perhaps even guardianship. For as your thoughts drift, Harrius, yours, dear dreamer, you begin to feel the lake within you, mirrored stillness, opening like a pool behind your heart, and the hush of it invites you not to answer, not to solve, but to simply be, as the creature is, as the lake is, and in the reeds nearby, where soft winds should rustle, the only sound is that of breath, endless, like silk, drawn across wood and overhead. The stars are closer now, not twinkling, but pulsing faintly in rhythm. A reminder that even in dreams, the cosmos watches gently. And you may not know it, but you have walked here before, not with feet, but with feelings, in moments when the world was too loud, too fast, and you wished only to be still. And now you are resting beside the water that remembers all things but asks for nothing in return. And as you sit, your presence leaves no ripple, for you belong here, as natural as dusk, as welcomed as dew. And across the lake's surface, a shape begins to form, not a reflection, not a figure, but a pattern, faint and spiraled, like thread curling through water, and it spins ever so slowly. A continuation of Alira's great spiral, now drifting in this unseen corner of the tapestry, stitching even dreams to dreams, weaving silence into silence. And as it turns, something within you begins to open, not a door, not a thought, but a warmth, a soft golden awareness that you are whole, that you are safe, that you are no longer carrying the weight of anything at all. And the creature at your side gives a tiny blink, as if to say, yes, yes, this is the place. And the lake does not reflect your face now, but your stillness, your breath, your trust, the way you've allowed the story to soften the world around you. And in that reflection, you'll see no edges, no burdens, only the roundness of peace, the spiral of rest, the endless calm that comes from being seen by a world that needs nothing from you except that you sleep. And now the stars begin to lower, not falling, just drawing close, their faint silver glow brushing the surface of the water. And as they touch, they do not sizzle or spark, they hum, a low vibration like the body makes when fully relaxed. And the spiral at the lake center responds, pulsing once, and with it, the whole world sighs. And you, dear dreamer, you sigh too, a breath not taken but received. And it fills every quiet chamber of your being, lulling you further inward, further still. And around you the trees bend, not to wind, but to the rhythm of your own rest, as if the world has tuned itself to you, and always has. And the creature beside you now stands, not to leave, not to end, but to walk a circle, slowly, in a gesture of closure that is not goodbye, only completion. And it loops once around you, once around the stone, and once around the reflection itself. And in that looping, a new thread is tied not with fingers, but with present sand. The spiral in the lake brightens for just a moment, then fades, not disappearing, only settling deeper beneath the surface. And the stars rise once more, returning to their distant places with no rush, no farewell. And the creature goes back upon the stone, eyes closed now, its task fulfilled. And you, floating now between the last breath of the tale and the first breath of sleep, feel everything within you rest completely, entirely, truly, as if the story has tucked you in, stitched you gently into the quiet between heartbeats, where no fear can follow and no sound can stir. And there you remain, not waiting, not dreaming, only resting in the purest hush, the hush beyond hush, where you become the thread itself. And now, even though all seems still so deeply, tenderly still, that not even a shadow dares to shift you, begin to feel something softer than motion, lighter than thought, drifting through the woven hush, not rising but emerging, like warmth blooming within warmth. And you find yourself once again in the dream world's embrace. Only this time there is no sense of place, no edge, no forest path or cottage door. Only the soft, open field of your breath, your presence, your peace. And in this space, the tapestry no longer feels like something around you, but something within you. A gentle weave of all the memories you've touched, of every hush you've let hold you. And here, the very air seems threaded with stories not yet born, glimmering like pollen in a beam of soft light that has no source, but knows exactly where to land. And from this golden quiet, something stirs, not a sound, but a shape of silence, a deep and patient pause that begins to gather into a circle around you, forming slowly, reverently, as if the story itself is sitting down to listen. And in that circle come figures not to speak, but simply to be shadows of Alira, and the child with the quiet traveler, with the memory-lit lantern, the small woolen creature from the lake's stone edge, all of them arriving like dusk on a cloudless evening, gentle, complete, and woven from the same hush that has held you since the first thread was pulled through linen and. But you feel their presence all the same, warm and nearby. Their silence, a kind of welcome. Their stillness, a kind of homecoming. And at the very center of this gathering, beneath the sky that no longer blinks, but breathes, appears a single loom, not old, not new, not touched by time at all, but glowing with the promise of one more breath, one more dream, one more spiral to begin. And beside it, resting on a simple wooden stool, sits someone new, and yet not new at all, someone whose hands are steady, whose eyes are closed, but whose fingers move gently over a folded cloth, tracing patterns not yet stitched, but already known. And though they do not speak, you understand what they are weaving. A new story, soft as this one, stitched not from memory, but from trust, from the gentle certainty that stories need not be rushed, need not be ended, need not be understood all at once. And that story, dear dreamer, is you, not your name or your past or your plans, but your stillness, your breathing, your willingness to drift into softness, to be held by quiet, to let go without farand. As they stitch, a spiral begins to bloom, once more, not on the cloth, but in the air, in the space between presence and rest, a spiral of light and hush and slowness. And it curls outward, gently reaching each figure in the circle and folding back into itself, like petals touched by moonlight. And when it touches you, you do not move, for there is no need, only a sense of being seen, being woven into something eternal and gentle, something that asks nothing from you but your breath, and even that it carries for you now. And your chest rises once more, slow as a tide returning home, and in that breath you feel a quiet joy, not sharp, not bright, but whole, like the warmth of tea cupped in two hands after a long walk in the rain, or the feeling of being remembered by a place you've never been. And all around you, the dream does not close. It opens wider, infinitely wide, but with no rush to show its end. For this is the truth of the tapestry. It is not a cloth, not a tale, not a world made only of threaded. It is a space, a song without sound, a place within you that remains always available, always unfolding. Whenever the world grows too loud, whenever your breath needs softening, whenever your thoughts wish to be held instead of solved. And as the spiral turns gently onward, and the weaver continues, their silent, slow stitching, the figures in the circle remain nearby, not fading, not departing, only resting with you in the hush they, too, once entered. And beneath all of it, you feel the soft vibration of belonging, of quiet worthiness, as if the land beneath your resting body is singing not out loud but in sensation a lullaby, made not of music but of meaning. And the words you never need to remember hum like a promise in your bones. You are not forgotten. You are not too much. You are not too late. You are held. You are enough. You are part of the spiral now. And with that, the dream wraps itself around you like the final thread around the final knot, not to bind you, but to soothe you. And you sink further still, deeper into the hush, into the tapestry, into the spiral, and sleep. And so, as all spirals do, this one begins to curl inward once more, not to vanish, not to fade, but to complete its final revolution with grace. And in that gentle closing, something unexpected stirs, not loud, not sudden, but like the flutter of a wing, deep within the dream-soaked sky. And it is in this hush, this perfect stillness, that cradles you now like the arms of a lullaby made whole, that the story offers its quiet twist. For just as the final thread is drawn tight and the weaver at the center of the circle breathes their slowest breath, yet the tapestry itself begins to glow, not with light but with remembrance. A soft shimmer rising from each thread, each knot, each woven moment of orchard mist, chapel, hush, forest, path, lantern, drift, frost, whispers, and barley moons. And you, dear dreamer, are not outside this brilliance, but part of it, your breath, one of the threads, your rest, one of the knots, your silence woven into the roots of trees and the curl of cottage smoke. And as the light rises, it does not scatter or blind, it warms, revealing that the tapestry is not bound to the loom, not tied to wood or wool or memory alone, but is alive, a vast, soft-skied world, blooming from the heart of the story itself. And the figures who gathered, the traveler, the lantern-bearer, the woolen guardian, even Illyra herself, even Illyra are no longer simply memory, but motion, waking not into the world, but into you, into your breath, your thought, your resting mind. And it is here, in this final hush, that the story reveals its softest secret, that the tapestry you've walked, the dream you felt wrapping around your limbs and loosening the knots in your chest, is not just a story you've entered. It is your own, woven from every breath you've given to quiet, from every moment you pause just long enough to notice how golden light pools on stone or how leaves spin in the wind like shy dancers. And it was a lyra long ago who began it, but it is you who finishes it now, not with needle or thread, but with rest, with trust, with the steady act of surrendering fully to the hush that has held you from the very first word damned. As the weaver lifts their eyes at last, their face bathed in the light of completion, you see, whether in your mind or your heart or some space softer still, that the weaver is also you, or the part of you that has always known how to hold stories without speaking, how to listen to the language of silence, how to wrap others in comfort even without touch. And as that truth settles over you like the last blanket drawn up under the chin of sleep, the tapestry begins to dissolve, not vanish, not disappear, but becoming wind and breath and feather and field, becoming skied and spiral and memory and moss, until there is no line between dream and dreamer, no border between the world you walked and the one you wake in, only the knowledge so sure that wherever you go from here, whether to waken or deeper rest, you carry the hush with you, always. In the quiet way your breath slows before sleep, in the calm you bring when others forget how to rest, in the way your soul now understands that all endings are simply a place where the spiral touches itself again. And so, as the story lays its final thread across your brow like a kiss from dusk, and the stars above dim their glow to lull your thoughts even lower, the field stretches wide. One last time around, you not endless now, but complete, and in the center, where you sleep, a single thread unravels slowly into the wind, carrying your dream onward, quietly, beautifully, into the next story, the next hush, the next world.